States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Certainly. Councilmember Harmon is absent. Councilmember Freeman?
Here.
Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez?
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Alejandro Gutierrez is not yet present. Councilmember Sen?
Here.
Councilmember Jordan?
Here.
And Mayor Rouse.
Here. All right, very good. You have a ceremonial item to read.
Item 1, Fire Prevention Week.
Okay, it's Fire Prevention Week of October 8th through 14th, 2023. Whereas the City of Santa Barbara Fire Department is committed to ensuring the safety and security of all who visit and live in Santa Barbara, and whereas fire is a serious public safety concern both locally and nationally, and cooking is the leading cause of home fires in the United States, with two of every five home fires starting in the kitchen, and 31% of these fires resulting from unattended cooking. And whereas community members who plan and practice a home fire escape plan are more prepared and will therefore be more likely to survive a fire. And whereas working smoke alarms cut the risk of dying in reported home fires almost in half. Whereas the City of Santa Barbara is dedicated to reducing the occurrence of home fires and home fire injuries through prevention and protection education. And whereas those who are responsive to public education measures can learn to take personal steps to increase their safety from fire, especially in their homes. And whereas the 2023 Fire Prevention Week theme, Cooking Safety Starts With You, Pay Attention to Fire Prevention, effectively serves to remind us to stay alert and use caution when cooking to reduce the risk of kitchen fires. One of those days. Now, therefore, I, Randy Rouse, by virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of the City of Santa Barbara, do hereby proclaim October 8th through 14th, 2023 as Fire Prevention Week. As such, I urge all community members to check their kitchens for fire hazards and use safe cooking practices, and to support the many public safety activities and efforts of the City of Santa Barbara Fire Department. Jim, thank you. Would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. Council members, thank you for this ceremonial recognition. We do want to encourage our whole community that it's not only a week that we promote fire prevention. We promote it all the time, but we do know that fires start with, especially kitchen fires, with unattended cooking. And I think that focusing on practicing safe cooking, teaching adolescents, our older adults, and the whole family be involved in the education is going to prevent home fires. We also want to mention to the community that we will be not only having this week with messaging, but we're going to take the whole month to cover prevention as a whole. We're going to talk about wildfire prevention, home hardening, fire-wise landscaping. We're going to talk about other topics for fire prevention during the whole month of October. So thank you so much, and our Fire Marshal, Ryan DiGiulio, will say a few words.
Mayor Rouse, council members, thank you for the proclamation. This is the 101st year that the National Fire Protection Association has done the National Fire Prevention Week. It's a nationwide effort. It stemmed from the Great Chicago Fire. After that fire, they decided we need to do something to collaboratively make our country more safe when it comes to fire prevention. The reason why I bring up the history is because it evolves. Our world evolves. The products we use, the technology we use evolves. We need to stay on top of that, and so do our community members. So the one topic I want to briefly talk about is lithium-ion batteries. They're starting to become prevalent in our society and in our community. And there's a lot of safety hazards that come with them. They're in phones, they're in laptops, they're in cars now even. So we wanted to let the public know that using the proper batteries for the device, disposing of them properly, only buying batteries that are nationally certified and tested by a lab company, this will really reduce the risk of these lithium-ion batteries. Unfortunately, we've seen an uptick in them, especially nationally, and especially in the larger cities, which is always kind of our temperature gauge of when it starts dwindling down into our community. There's been multiple fatality fires in New York City because of e-bikes and e-scooters. Other large metropolitan areas are seeing issues as well. So we just wanted to get the word out to the public that be a little bit diligent when it comes to using these lithium-ion batteries. Use them properly, dispose of them properly, and that'll really help us to continue our fire prevention efforts here in the city. So thank you again for the proclamation.
Thank you. Mr. Jordan, do you have a question for the chief?
Real quick, just thinking while you're talking about that, what's the proper fire extinguisher to have in the household for lithium exposures versus your normal, whatever it is? I know there's ABCs, and I don't know what I have other than the red canisters that are just for normal fires. But it seems to me that's not the answer for our lithium, right?
Yes and no, Councilmember Jordan. With the great thing about lithium-ion batteries is they pack a big punch in a little, either a battery or some kind of continuation of a power stream. So once that fails, once that lithium-ion battery fails, it really turns into what we call a normal combustible fire, which would be a Class A fire. So your ABC extinguishers will work for these type of incidents. Once that energy is released from the battery, now it just turns into a regular type combustible fire, not so much a metal fire or something like that. Sure.
All right, thank you very much, and congratulations. Madam Administrator, is there any changes to the agenda?
No changes, Mayor Rouse.
Okay, very good. With that, we'll move to the consent calendar. You have some items to read, Madam Clerk?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Item 2, Library Department Acceptance of Stay and Play Donation Resolution. Recommendation the council B, adopt by reading of title only, a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending Resolution Number 23076, adopting the budget for fiscal year 2024 to accept a donation in the amount of $6,000 funded by the Packard Foundation. Item 3, Library Department Acceptance of Adult and Family Literacy Grant Resolution. Recommendation that Council B adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending Resolution Number 23076, adopting the budget for fiscal year 2024 to accept a grant in the amount of $56,218 funded by the California State Library. Item 4, Reserve Policy Adoption Resolution. Recommendation the council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara establishing policies for reserves for the city's general fund, enterprise funds, and internal service funds, and amending Resolution Number 22126. Item 5, proposed amendment to direct the city clerk to correct clerical errors with the 2024 fiscal year Parks and Recreation Department schedule of fees and changes by inserting replacement pages into Resolution Number 23078 resolution. Recommendation the council B adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara directing the city clerk to correct clerical errors by inserting replacement pages into Resolution Number 23078 adopted on June 13, 2023, which became effective on July 1, 2023, or as provided therein, and amend the City of Santa Barbara schedule of penalties, fees, and service charges. And that's all, Mr. Mayor.
All right, very good. Does anyone from council need to pull an item off the consent agenda? And is there anyone online regarding that, Ms. Clerk?
No raised hands, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, with that, I will entertain a motion for the approval of the consent calendar.
Move the consent.
Moved by Freeman,
Second.
second by Alejandro Gutierrez. May we have the vote, please?
Very good. This is a motion for the entirety of the consent calendar, a motion by Councilmember Friedman and seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Alejandro Gutierrez. You can go ahead and vote.
Item passes unanimously with Megan Harmon absent. Thank you. With that, we'll move on to general public comment, 3 minutes at the podium for anything that is not on the agenda, but was within the purview of this body. And we'll begin with Wendy Santa Maria.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council members. My name is Wendy Santamaria. I'm an organizer here in the community and a resident on the east side of Santa Barbara. I am here to, again, request that you all move forward with the proposed tenant protections that various groups in the community, including the Santa Barbara Tenants Union, CAUSE, and many others have brought forward to help with the ongoing housing crisis. In particular, right now, we have been proposing several changes to the just cause eviction protections, in particular with the rent eviction cases that we've been seeing pop up more and more frequently. This includes stopping rent evictions unless that they are for safety and habitability reasons. When landlords are renovating for cosmetic or other reasons, we're not saying don't do it, but it just does not warrant displacing somebody from their home. If somebody wants to renovate their home for cosmetic reasons, we totally think, just relocate your tenant, relocate them. And more importantly, when the tenant is allowed to come back, make sure that there's a cap on that rent. Because otherwise, when the tenant is moved out of there to remodel or just, put a new coat of paint or whatever it is, and then they come back, there is nothing that stops the landlord from using that reason to raise the rent beyond what even the state cap is. We need to make sure that there is some local control because, as we've mentioned before, even the state rent cap is not enough. Families keep getting pushed out. I personally just received a rent increase. This is hitting a lot of us. It's enough that this is widely popular and widely needed. And in the long run, we've been pushing for things like rent stabilization and a rent board for years. We will continue to do that. But in the immediate moment, we are pushing for these rent eviction protections. And we want to make sure that you all know, we're in this for the long run. We intend to push for this for as long as it takes until we get something done. And we are very much asking that you take this matter, especially with rent evictions right now, urgently, because there are families right now that can be preserved from ending up either on the streets or completely displaced from our communities. But if we act now, it's not the end all be all. No one policy is going to fix this, but we need to take actions now because not doing anything is an action in itself and it's hurting our community. Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is Amber Asher.
Hello again, City Council. This is my first quiet day. Is this how it usually is here? It's noise. I am Amber Asher. I have lived in Santa Barbara for a lot of years, over 20 since coming here for school at UCSB, and I've lived downtown for the last 5. A couple of weeks ago, an original poem was shared on my Facebook feed. The author is named Jacqueline Correa. She is somebody that I know as Jackie. Out you go, expensive place to live, rightfully so, they say. Out you go, you teachers, you plumbers. 400K earners, join us, newcomers. Out we go, no wiggle room here. Slave, pay, repeat. Sorry, kids, say bye to grandma. Out we go, sad face emoji. Jackie is an early childhood educator who grew up here, has lived in Santa Barbara, and now is raising her 2 young kids with her partner in Goleta. Jackie was my daughter's main caregiver, apart from us, between the ages of 3 and 5. She is gifted and special, and my daughter Olivia still asks to spend time with her and remembers her aloud as one of the most important adults in my life. Her poem was not motivated by me. It reflects her own experience in today's situation. It speaks to the fear, stress, dread, and the tough choices that local longtime families are facing as they experience the diminishing of housing stock and the skyrocketing rental rates beyond the already high limits in place. Her poem was received with many encouraging words and shared stories from those who have experienced similar pressures. You hear a lot of those voices if you're on Nextdoor. You see stories all around you. I come to you today as a member of the Santa Barbara Tenants Union, and I bring in her voice because she can't be here today, and she asked that I share it. I ask you to take notice of her voice among many as a representative of what's happening today. And as a member of the Tenants Union, I ask you to make whatever changes and improvements to existing ordinances that you can, as urgently as you're able, to support the diversity and the security of the rental community in our town. We've made lots of very specific recommendations, so I'm not standing up here to enumerate those for you again today, but I do appeal to all of us as community and to your greater humanity, and thank you for the work that you do every day for us. Thanks.
Very good. Max Golden? Sorry, any hands raised?
Hi, I promised not to use the F word this time, Randy. I'm sorry. I'm just repeating what the last two said, I guess to be more specific on the policy and just to be repetitive about it. Right to return to the unit after the unit has been renovated with the 10% cap. But I will kind of add, by the way, that a few of us crunched some math recently. We found that every year, if a $2,000 a month bedroom is increased by 10%, in 10 years, it'll be $5,100 a month. So just to stay with that for just a minute, the 10% cap ask, I think, is partly just because it's saying, look, this is actually really legally easy to do without having a rent control ordinance because this is already the state law. You can just say, right to return plus Tenant Protection Act applies. Don't leave it vague, just say it, right? Easy peasy, do it, thanks. And I know the rent control thing is like a trigger word for some people, but even with that, if rent today that I'm paying that's about $2,000 a month turns into $5,100 in 10 years, I will be gone way before 10 years, right? Like I can't afford that. I don't know how many people I'd have to pack into the bedroom, right? So there's just another elephant in the room that really, really, really still needs to be addressed, and to not listen to these sort of the economists that are like, Santa Barbara is gonna look like it was bombed, like a war-torn country or something, because I mean, I just don't understand who's going to live here in 10 years if a $2,000 bedroom is $5,100. That's completely, that's impossible. Unless you just want like very rich people to live here. If that's what you want, then don't ever do rent control. I wanted to just add the tenant harassment piece is really important. I'll repeat kind of what I said about in Isla Vista, the Core Spaces Tenant Association people, CBC and the sweeps. I think the Codo, the 215 Bath Street people are experiencing something really similar right now, which is that that some of the landlords' attorneys, they look at all these laws being passed and they're like, well, what is sort of the edge of this, of where we can get away with things? And instead of abiding by the law, they just find out clever ways to sort of harass and push out tenants so that they have to leave. So integrating some kind of tenant harassment ordinance, either on its own or something that's slipped into the Just Cause ordinance right now to just address, like, you know, it's prohibited that you lie about the law, for example, to push people out, right? Lacey Taylor, John Tyne, their law firm did that really explicitly. Like within a week after the county passed the law, they posted a bunch of notices on everyone's doors saying the law doesn't apply to you. It was a blatant lie, but there was no anti-harassment ordinance that really could apply to that. I tried reporting them to the bar. The bar said, you know, basically like lawyers lie about everything all the time. Don't worry about it. You can't really get in trouble for lying. Lying is, you know, what's a word? We're just all debating ideas here or something. But over 90% of the CBC and the sweeps tenants did leave because they no longer trusted legal aid lawyers. They didn't trust tenant union people. They didn't trust the county. They just said, the law doesn't even apply to us. So they left. So please take care of that as well. Thanks.
All right, very good. Madam Speaker, or Madam Clerk, are there anybody online?
No, Mr. Mayor, no raised hands.
Okay, very good. And with that, we will close public comment and move to committee assignment reports. Anyone in council have a committee assignment report? All right, seeing none, we will move on to the next item. Madam Clerk?
Very good. This is item 7, fiscal year 2025 Community Development Block Grant Funding Process, Priorities, and Criteria.
Very good.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor Rouse and City Council members. My name is Lindsay Drews, and I'm the Senior Community Development Program Specialist. And here with me today is Laura Doubles, the Housing and Human Services Manager. We are here before you today. Oh, yes, sorry. Thank you. Perfect. We are here before you today to discuss the Community Development Block Grant Funding Process, Priorities, and Criteria for fiscal year 25. Our recommendation today will be that Council approves the Community Development Block Grant proposed application review process and provides direction to the Community Development Human Services Committee on the CDBG funding criteria and priorities, and that you authorize staff to solicit proposals for the CDBG grants for fiscal year 2025. As an overview, annually, Council authorizes the solicitation of the CDBG funding proposals and approves the CDBG process, criteria, and priorities. As you may recall, last October, Council directed the Human Service and Public Service grant allocation process to be transitioned to a biannual award process. The CDBG award process continues to be an annual process because the annual development of our annual action plan is a HUD requirement, and HUD requires that we identify our activities annually. Additionally, in addition to these requirements, conducting the CDBG allocation process annually ensures that we are able to efficiently award our funding towards current community needs and ensure that we meet HUD's requirement to expend the funds in a timely manner. At this time, I would like to take a moment to give a brief overview of the federal CDBG program. Each year since 1975, the City of Santa Barbara has received an entitlement allocation from the Community Development Block Grant from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, otherwise known as HUD. The national objectives within the CDBG program are that it benefits low and moderate income persons, eliminates or prevents slums or blight, and it meets other urgent local community development needs. Every 5 years, we're required to develop a consolidated plan, and with that, our priorities. The consolidated plan adopted in 2020 established that our priorities are homelessness assistance, public facilities and infrastructure, decent housing availability, and economic development, of which 15% can be used on homelessness assistance. The other 65% can be used on the other 3 priorities, and 20% is used on admin. This year, as we began our funding process and the establishment of our annual action plan, the Community Development Human Service Committee directed staff to conduct a survey of the Santa Barbara residents to identify their local priorities. The survey was open from August 15th to September 15th. It was offered and marketed in English and in Spanish through various marketing efforts, including social media, our community partners, community centers, and printed media. Out of the 776 individuals who responded, 84% were Santa Barbara residents, 34% rented, 62 own, 6% live in subsidized housing, 40% are seniors, 18 have a disability or an access or functional need, or have a family member with such. 78% are white or Caucasian, 14% Hispanic Latino, 4% Asian, 2% Black or African American, 1% American Indian or Alaskan Native, 1% Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander, and 5% are another race. Within the survey, participants were provided a list of eligible CDBG activities and were asked to select their top 5. And showing on our screens now are the top 10 that were selected. In hopes of facilitating a more specific community input, a field was made available with an other category where respondents could fill in what they would like to see within the community. While some suggestions would be ineligible based on our con plan or based on CDBG regulations, activities that were suggested in the other category that would be eligible include the improved lighting on freeway overpasses, storm water infiltration improvements, the West Side neighborhood sidewalk repair and lighting and beautification, facilities for children and families, senior centers, and affordable senior housing. These suggestions and others that would be eligible CDBG projects will be presented at the mandatory workshop upon your approval today. As a city, we're required to hold 2 public hearings. The first one was held on September 26th. At this survey, the Community Development Human Service Committee reviewed the survey, the needs, the priorities, the goals, and the upcoming grant cycle. Based on the community survey results and the annual action plan public hearing, the Community Development Human Services Committee recommends that housing rehabilitation is established as an annual priority for fiscal year 2025. In addition to our previously adopted annual priorities of homelessness assistance, public facilities and infrastructure, and economic development. For planning purposes, we we anticipate receiving $876,711 for fiscal year 2025, of which approximately 600,000 will be eligible for public facilities, infrastructure, economic development, and if approved today, housing rehabilitation projects. 15% will be used on homelessness assistance, and 20% is used on admin. A contingency plan will be established in the case that the federal entitlement is more or less than anticipated. The Community Development and Human Services Committee, or otherwise known as the CDHSC, role in the process is to evaluate applications and interview the applicants, recommend grant awards, monitor the grantees, and conduct site visits, provide input on the needs of the community and the input on the needs of the community members that they represent. It's a 13-member board. They represent a broad range of community interest, including representatives from low and moderate income neighborhoods. To be eligible to apply, applicants must meet the following criteria: benefit city residents who are low or moderate income, be a nonprofit, local unit of government, or a for-profit providing eligible services to micro-enterprises, address specific social or physical needs, present a marketing strategy with specific efforts to target ethnic or racial communities, show support to intended clients, identify all funding sources, including funding from public and private sources, have reasonable administrative costs, and identify geographical service areas. Additionally, organizations that pay their staff with grant funding and meet the local minimum wage will receive an extra point in the scoring process. Applicants will be evaluated and scored on the following categories: their agency's past performance and administrative overhead, the board's composition and level of involvement, the board itself, its quality of service, the program itself, the quality of service and staff's capacity and the applicant's ability to provide bicultural and bilingual staff, that their outcomes are realistic and measurable, the need for the program, and that there's not a duplication of service, and the amount in which they collaborate with other entities serving similar clientele, and the financial stability of the applicant. In addition, capital applicants will be evaluated on the following: having a clearly defined project description that meets federal, state, and local requirements, and that the project is feasible. The project need, who will benefit from the project. And finally, the reasonableness of the project cost and the project's viability to continue without full city funding. Upon council's approval today, staff will undertake various efforts to ensure that all local nonprofits, units of government, and economic development entities in the city know of the upcoming funding availability. This includes sending a notice to our mailing list, which includes service providers and interested applicants, publishing an ad in The Voice, issuing a press release to local media, noticing on the city's website and the city's news section, posting onto the city's social media sites, posting an article in the City News and Brief newsletter, and posting the notice of funding availability on the Santa Barbara Nonprofit Resource Network's website, which is a resource hub for the local nonprofit community. If approved today on November 2nd, the neighborly application and the application documents will be made available online. On November 9th, a mandatory workshop will be held at which staff will review the eligibility requirements and the process for submitting an application. During the application period, staff will be available by phone or email to answer any questions or provide support. In addition, as time permits, staff will review early application submittals and provide feedback to those applicants who can then edit their proposals and resubmit prior to the deadline. The deadline will be December 7th, at 4:30 p.m. January to February, we'll review the applications and the interviews. And in March, we'll return to council with our recommendations for the utilization of the CDBG funding. At that time, our committee, the Community Development and Human Services Committee, will also have reviewed the grants from this past year for human services and make recommendations to council on continuing that funding. And so today I can return to my our recommendation as staff, and I'm here for any questions should you have them, and I thank you for your time.
All right, thanks very much. Are there questions from council? Ms. Snedden?
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. Thank you for your presentation. I guess I have some clarifying questions just because some of the priorities surprise me, and when I make comments about maybe recommendations for reprioritization, I just want to understand for the respondents. So 78% of the respondents are white or Caucasian and 62% homeowners. So maybe you could comment on that. To me, it's not representative of the city by actually like a lot of tens of percents. So if you could help me with that, a little bit about maybe the outreach or who's responding and in what format maybe, or.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that question, Councilwoman Snedden. I'm happy to respond to that. And so staff, we did take a lot of different efforts to market to a broad range of entities within the community. And so we marketed to the Housing Authority, we marketed to the community centers, including the West Side Community Center, the East Side and the East Side Library, the Central Library. We took a lot of different efforts. We put an ad in the Voice and in English and in Spanish to market to a broad range. And what interested staff was that even though it wasn't necessarily showcasing the people in which this funding would serve, they still identified the same needs. And so the needs being economic development, and I can go back to that slide if you would like.
Sure, thank you. It's slide 9.
Sorry. Here we are. So permanent supportive housing being homelessness for services and prevention, housing rehabilitation, and then parks facilities, which is infrastructure and facilities for housing, childcare centers. All of those fall within our current con plan priorities.
Okay, thank you. And then 40% of the respondents are seniors, and that's not a large childcare need group. So I'm wondering, did you see the same? So for the childcare centers category, I was surprised that that was lower on the list. And then I was looking at maybe the age of the respondents, and did that also rise to people were responding for that need, even if it wasn't a need that they personally had?
So the answer would be, I would say yes. So as we look at it, childcare centers is number 8, and so even though 40% of the seniors, 40% of the respondents were seniors, they still identified childcare centers being a priority.
Okay, thank you. And then just one more. I was surprised to hear you mention stormwater and freeway lights. Did people really put that down as a top concern for the use of these funds for stormwater?
That, and among other things, there was a lot of things that were written down, and so some of which would not, being that the funding is $600,000, we want to be very conscious of how far that will go. And so, however, that would be an eligible project. And so if Public Works came forward with a project for stormwater, then that would be eligible under our current con plan priorities.
Okay. And then I would think, just as my last question, park and recreational facilities and sidewalk improvements, both of those sound like they are Measure C eligible. Is that correct? Their infrastructure?
Ms. Bjork?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Snedden, Yes, but we are talking about the CDBG portion of the grants, which is for capital improvements. As you recall, last year, the council took an action for the human services portion to be a 2-year grant, and since that's general fund funded, we do not have to revisit that annually. So that's not part of the conversation here today. It is just capital improvements.
These are all capital improvements.
There's a small amount that's available for social services. I think it's 15%, but I will defer to Ms. Drews.
So like permanent supportive housing, homeless assistance, is that, I think I've misunderstood. So that's a capital improvement.
So what we can, excuse me, sorry, Councilwoman Sneddon. What we can do last year after council's action to move that process to a 2-year process, what we were able to do is this year we can ask those entities that provided those homeless services and that are our current public service grants if they would like to continue with their request, and then we'll represent that to you in the spring for the adoption of the recommendation. And so that 15% is already set aside for those public service grants. And then within that, the 65% can be used on economic development or on capital infrastructure projects. And if approved today, housing rehabilitation.
Okay, thank you. So homeless assistance on this one, choice 1, is capital improvement.
So this is, on the list that we're seeing currently is just what the community identified as their priorities, which is still consistent with our action plan.
Okay, I apologize. I am misunderstanding what the well, okay, I'll leave it at that.
Councilmember
Thank you.
Sneddon, I'm just sorry. I'm going to jump in
You're
here
good.
really quick. So that actually falls within the 15% that's allowable in the CDBG for public services. So that part of it's not under capital infrastructure projects. That actually is a public service under 15%.
So maybe you could help me. So this is what the community prioritized, and all of these are eligible for the funds that we're talking about today.
Yes, correct. So the services, though, that you see homeless assistance under, that falls within the 15% of that CDBG figure.
But that's a service. Number 1 there is a service.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Ms. Gutierrez.
Could you explain again the breakdown of the funding, like the 15%, 60, and 20? And just for clarification to the public.
Absolutely, Councilwoman Gutierrez, I would be happy to. So within this slide here, we can see the consolidated plan priorities and goals, and that's representative typically for the annual priorities as well. And so homelessness assistance, that can, 15% of our annual entitlement can go towards homelessness assistance. 65% goes towards the other 3, or can go towards any of the other 3. 20% is used for admin.
Okay. And so today we're going to, council can give any input on priorities that we
They would-
see also in the community?
They would need to fall within our consolidated plan priorities, which are shown on the screen now.
Which
If
are
it
these
did-
right here?
Yes,
in
which are
slide
these
6?
right here. If it did not, then we would need to do an amendment to our consolidated plan, which is quite a lengthy process.
Okay. Just because I used to sit on this board, and I remember when we had the issue of youth violence, and we changed it because that reduced in the city. But we have a huge literacy problem now in our city. And usually, even the state will look at literacy scores within children and will evaluate actually how much money they have to put aside to jails and prisons. I'm just concerned of what we're going to see in the next 5 to 10 years in the city. And I know that housing, homeless, and fixing up facilities are huge priorities in the city. And I think everybody that lives here can agree with that. I'm also a little concerned with the outcome of the survey. I do want to thank you for the job that you guys are doing. I know how difficult it is to outreach and to be everywhere and to capture everybody's input. So first of all, thank you so much for all this, the work that you do. But is there any way that we can get more creative in when we put these surveys out, maybe with the people, the organizations that we give this funding to, if they can help with these type of outreaching with the population that they serve?
Yes, absolutely. That was, thank you, Councilwoman Gutierrez. That was one of the other things that I did not mention, is that we also reached out to all of the grantees that we've had for the past 2 years to request that they marketed the survey as well. And I would happily hear any other suggestions that council or anyone else has, so that we can have a broader outreach in future years.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mr. Friedman.
Thank you. I just have one question. When we're looking at homeless assistance and housing availability, how is that prioritized? And what I'm trying to understand is, since we only have a limited amount of dollars, are we prioritizing for the homeless services, those individuals on the streets who might have alcohol, drug, or co-occurring disorders, and trying to get them into permanent supportive housing? Or are we prioritizing individuals, families who are in housing or just temporarily came out of housing, but there might be a path to get them back into housing so they or keep them in their housing? Where would these funds, how are these funds prioritized? Because again, we have limited, and I'm trying to understand if one is coming at the expense of the other.
So I'm going to do, thank you, Councilman Member Friedman. I'm going to do my best to answer that question. It seems like it's slightly beyond my purview. However, so within CDBG, our homelessness assistance, that goes towards services. And so currently our contracts for the public services include Transition House, PATH, New Beginnings, and then Safe Parking. And so it's those services that our CDBG, it goes towards. And so that can include case management, where they're trying to get them into housing. And then as far as the CDBG for decent housing availability, that's would only be housing rehabilitation, not necessarily placing homeless individuals into housing.
So it'd be that last part would be capital then?
Correct.
Okay, so we have the capital to create the housing that we want people to be able to live in, which is decent housing. And then the other is the services that, when we're talking about Transition House or Safe Parking, that will help people either prevent them from going into homelessness or temporarily give them the stability to get the case management they need. So it's the service. So it's not one at the expense of the other, it's both. You're doing capital
That's correct, and I think,
and the services.
Laura, do you?
Thank you, Councilmember Freeman. Yeah, the 15% is for the services of the agencies that help homeless and placing them in housing and taking care of them. But the other part she's talking about is for rehabilitation of like single-family residences where they're low-income homeowners, that we could actually assist those. So the 15% that we give for the homeless services, that actually goes to the agencies, and those agencies, the majority of them are under the HMIS. They, prioritize individuals on what services they need, and they, case manage and help. They also provide the permanent supportive services when they're placed in housing as well.
Thank you.
All right, very good. If there are no further questions, do we have any public speakers online?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, very well. With that, is back to council for comments. Ms. Nedden.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse, and thank you both for, I know this committee does such important work all year long, and this committee in particular is so diligent and careful and dedicated to every dollar and how it's allotted. I would just like to make my comments for prioritization among those community priorities. Is anything in here with a priority for children? I think that is, we are losing children from this community. they're being priced out, and so they won't show up the same way in a survey, or families with children maybe are a little bit busier and not answering their surveys. So I would move child care centers, and these are just my comments, I don't know the rest of council, but I would move that up on the list, or any of these services, homeless assistance that can be directed toward children experiencing homelessness, or preventing and supportive services for families with children. I think this is sort of a perfect category. We have a lot of different types of funding that are going into these different things. I think this one in particular, I think we could really, it might help with the prioritization if it was things that go towards, especially homeless and our children experiencing homelessness is our really most vulnerable population. And that I would put that above single-family housing rehabilitation, even though that's important. I would put that lower on the list. And then things like sidewalk improvements, I really believe Measure C should be covering that, and we have separate funding for that type of infrastructure. So if it's between people who might, all people benefit from sidewalks, but again, with that emphasis on children and families, that's where I would put, and especially childcare centers. I think we've had childcare surveys countywide. We see that as a huge need in the community, and that is often something that can make the difference for a family going into homelessness or not. So I would put that higher on the list. And thank you to the committee. You do such careful and important work.
Mr. Friedman.
All right, thank you. Could you just remind me again, it was $600,000 for this?
Approximately.
Thank you. I just wanted to be sure I remember that correctly. My comments are brief. I concur with my colleague, Councilmember Sneddon, just the importance of housing stability, especially for families. So for me, it would, I don't have much to change here, if anything really, but the homeless assistance, but also to the extent that we can use those funds to strategically help those who are in transitional housing because they lost their housing or trying to get into housing, if we could prioritize them, especially with children. And then to the extent that we could get individuals into housing, because we hear, week after week, day after day, that housing is the greatest challenge. And unless there is stable housing, even the childcare becomes an issue because you don't have the stable housing to go home to. You don't have a home to go back to. So, to the extent that we can prioritize individuals, especially with younger children, that would be my preference. But when we're looking at homeless assistance and decent housing in these four that are up on the slide, I don't have anything to change. And then just for our youth as well, because we want to make sure they have stable housing. Thank you.
Ms. Gutierrez.
Thank you again for all your hard work. I also agree with my colleague, Councilmember Sneddon. Having worked with families and children, I can tell you that the income of the families, they largely will go to the rent or mortgage and childcare. And so for me, that is a huge priority. Another priority is the emergency shelters and transition housing, just because it is really difficult when you are left without a home, especially with a family. There's actually two places where you can actually go. It's the safe parking or transition house, and there is a waiting list. And also for women, it's really difficult for, a female to not have a home and safe parking, and that's the only place I could really think, because women normally won't go to PATH unless there is, they have other issues. But if a working class female just, loses her job or loses her place to live, it's really difficult to find a place to live if you don't have, a support system here. We have a huge homeless problem here, and I think like any other city in the state of California, but the child care center and the transitional housing, I will agree with both my colleagues, are also a priority for me. Thank you.
All right, very good. Well, if there are no further comments or deliberation, I will entertain a motion.
Yes, I will move the motion for a staff recommendation for the CDBG funding.
All right. That's a motion by Alejandro Gutierrez. Second by Eric Friedman. May we have the vote, please?
This is a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Alejandro Gutierrez, seconded by Councilmember Friedman for the recommended action. Go ahead and vote, please.
May I ask a question?
Ms. Nen, the motion?
Is it in the motion also that the priorities, or is that in the comments enough, or does that need to be in the motion?
Councilmember Snen, the recommendation is our Part A of the recommendation is to provide direction. So I think staff has probably received the direction from you. That's probably sufficient, as long as they understand that. And the other parts of the recommendation B is to authorize staff to solicit the proposals for the CDBG grant. So we need recommendation B, so it's A and B, and then also to provide the direction. So I think it's probably encompassed.
Thank you.
As long as staff understands. Okay.
Thank you.
So the motion can stand as is, and staff has the recommendations as put forth by the
I
comments.
think it's fine. Yep.
All right, very good. Good? All right.
Okay, as I stated, the motion, Mayor Pro Tem Alejandro Gutierrez, seconded by Councilmember Friedman, to approve the recommended actions. Go ahead and vote, please.
Motion passed unanimously, 6-0, with Councilmember Harmon absent. Okay, with that, we'll go to council and staff communications, if there are any. And if not, we'll go to council member engagements. Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Last week, I attended the Senior Expo, which was a great event held by so many great organizations helping out the senior members of our community. I also attended a meeting with the Harding Community Center or Resource Center project with you, Mr. Mayor. Attended the Santa Barbara Historical Museum California Missions exhibit. I recommend everyone check that out. Also attended the Westmont What Are Churches For discussion, which was a real interesting group of people just discussing what churches can do for our community other than the obvious. Attended the Elected Leaders Forum to address homelessness with many of you. I also went to Los Angeles and met with the Japanese consulate with the Japanese sister city, and that was a really great experience. Attended the community leaders briefing on LGBTQ tax, gender affirming care, and abortion rights at Planned Parenthood. I also attended the AIA walking tour. Attended the Bread and Roses fundraiser, which was just great, and also attended the Indigenous Peoples Day recognition with Mayor Rouse, and the Neighborhood Advisory Council meeting, unfortunately, was once again canceled due to lack of quorum. Thank you.
Very good. Ms. Sneddon.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. I attended Arts and Lectures series with Martha Graham at the Granada and learned that it was a sold-out show, the Granada Theater, over 1,000 people there, and learned that Martha Graham grew up on Garden Street. And there were people in the audience who were hoping that the city might acknowledge that in the next year or two with her history there. And then also attended the, with yourself, Mayor Rouse, who spoke so eloquently at the Rescue Mission fundraiser, and one of the honorees was our retired police chief, Barney Malekian.
Very good. Ms. Gutierrez.
I attended the Pride and Joy LGBTQ plus this community panel on Friday, and it was their first annual community event.
All right, very good. Well, I did some of that stuff with these guys, plus Ms. Bjork and myself and Mr. Wiltshire and a staffer went out to one of the smaller cruise ships. Very interesting time, though. We had a plaque exchange with them. It's a high latitude cruise ship that goes to the Arctic and the Antarctic, Svalbard, and the Northwest Passage. So that was kind of fascinating. It was interesting to talk to them, too, about their environmental precautions and how they handle any kind of effluent or discharge in these coastal waters. So I thought that was pretty rewarding. And with that, if there are no further council member engagements, we will adjourn. Thank you.